Hey there, welcome back to the Greater You. Good to see you guys today. Very interesting topic that came up. This one struck like lightning, which, hey, it's a miracle. So the topic is miracles, folks. So this is an interesting one to talk about, especially against the backdrop of well-being. I promise there's a method to my madness on this one. So stick with us as we have a little brief conversation about this. This has been on my mind lately. We live in a time of science. I am a man of science myself. In my spare time, I'm not kidding. I do things like listen to podcasts about particle physics. I'm as big a nerd as you'll meet. I love reading scholarly articles. Yeah, sure. I skip some of the method sections like everyone else. Sometimes I dig into it. I do like to look at the statistical analysis at times of different studies. What I'm telling you is that I'm a science-minded guy. If you'd heard of Gretchen Rubin, she's got the whole four tendencies, which is a cool personality tendency assessment. I am a questioner through and through. Every time I take her test, I'm a questioner. So I ask a lot of questions, and it drives me to find answers. So one of those questions that's been on my mind lately is, are miracles real? Do they happen? Have they ever been a thing? As a man of science, right? You can think people would say, like, oh, no, like everything's explainable, and that stuff that ancient people said were miracles was just them not understanding the science of how things worked. Fair argument, fair argument. But I think when we talk about this and look at it a little differently, two things that can possibly come out of our little conversation today. One is that I may persuade you to think about miracles differently and really kind of dig in and say, like, wait, miracles might actually be a thing. And number two is finding ways to understand that this can be a part of your well-being. I'll tie that in at the end. So first of all, let's actually tackle that question, what is a miracle? So this is according to my opinion, okay? In my experience, obviously the disclaimer is everything that I'm saying is just my own opinion and my own experience and based on what I've read, studied, and felt impressed about. So take it with a grain of salt, right? So for me, a miracle is not something supernatural necessarily. So, you know, let me give an example. A buddy of mine was just had a shoulder done. It was his third time actually having to have a shoulder surgery. This time they did a total shoulder replacement. Um, you know, the what I call the miracle of modern medical science allowed him to get a full shoulder. Now, interestingly, he did receive what we call a priesthood blessing in my faith when he was going to go into the procedure. And he had specific promises that were bestowed upon him that he would have a quick recovery, that it would go well. The interesting thing, so this is a guy who's not, a guy who he's very well acquainted with pain, right? I mean, shoulder injuries are terrible. Anyone that's had shoulder surgery, I've had multiple clients, friends, family members that have had shoulder stuff. It can be so excruciatingly painful. He was promised that it would be basically a pain-free recovery. He is 4 months, 3 months post-surgery now, 3 months post-surgery. He has not had any significant pain this whole entire time. And his arm was working great. It's rehabilitating excellently, working better than it was when it was bone on bone. And his shoulder is great and he's pain-free. That was a miracle, in my opinion, twofold, right? So there's the miracle of modern medical science with the rigors of all the efforts that have been put in over the years and the inspiration that I believe guides the process of innovation has led to the medical science required to be able to put a new joint together in a shoulder. That's miracle number one. And I really think those are miracles, people. So think about miracles differently. If we're always thinking about supernatural, like fire in the sky, whatever, someone moving a mountain with their mind, I don't know. You're going to miss the point that the modern day, every day, probably always has been miracle. They probably appear more mundane than you'd think. You have to have the right eyes to see them. The second part of that is that his faith and his spirituality came in play, and he did receive that miracle of being pain-free. That is huge. Being pain-free in a shoulder recovery, man, those are usually just miserable for people. That's a miracle. Miracle number two. So what is a miracle? It's when great things happen that manifest powers that are maybe beyond what we can understand, um, or maybe they're even in alignment with what we understand, but they happen anyway, and they happen in a way that impacts you significantly. So it's a broad definition, I know, but I think that it's a more correct way to look at miracles than waiting for, someone being raised from the dead necessarily. Although those miracles have happened in the history of this planet too. Even I'm going through a book currently right now. I was listening to multiple books, read multiple books at any given moment, and going through a book that a client referred me to, where a guy's talking about like a near-death experience he had. He was a former atheist, all that stuff, was a physician, and a very popular book. And he had the miracle of recovery from a bacterial meningitis infection. Most people, when they get these, they die. And he was in a coma for 7 days, and he bounced back from this. And it's a miracle that he's alive and telling his story. And he had multiple miracles of having experiences on the other side. Those are just a couple of examples. So, miracles are very interesting. I do believe they happen, and I do believe they're real. I think you have to have the eyes to see them and the ears to hear them, and you have to have your heart tuned in to look for these things. So for me, it's looking for, some Christians will call them like God winks, or just believers will call them God winks, where there's these little moments where things will happen where they just line up better. Guys, they're more than a coincidence. So coincidences sure can happen, right? Miracles are more than that. They're something that promotes something good in your life, gets you to pause and think more deeply about things, maybe turn your heart over to something larger than yourself, have a meaningful conversation with someone. You might be working a miracle in someone's life right now. That neighbor that you've been taking the trash out for the last month because they were recovering from shoulder surgery, maybe you're performing a miracle for them, right? Does the miracle have to be huge and supernatural? I don't think so. But I do think that they're real, and I do think that they promote a general sense of well-being and faith. So that brings us to this last idea here. What does this have to do with well-being? Well, there's a recent study that came across in all of my studies, a couple of studies that came across that, Gen Z, an interesting generation that's gone through a lot already in their young years, some of them are starting to inch their way back towards faith. That's a miracle, right? Some studies have shown that when people are looking at well-being, so we have the 7 areas of well-being, right? One of them is spirituality. There is research, data-backed research, that having a belief system and living it increases a person's well-being and happiness above control groups, above people that have beliefs and don't live them. Those people tend to be less happy. And people who have no belief system at all tend to be less happy. So people tend to be happier if they have a belief system and then they act on it or live it. So that sets people up to see the miracles, right? If you are getting engaged in your local congregation of whatever, whether you're a Buddhist or Jewish or from Islam or whatever, and you get engaged in your local worship service and you help a person out in your congregation or whatever you want, you're gathering, you're going to see miracles in people's lives because you're doing something good, and good tends to have a catapulting effect. We had that video recently about the upward spiral, and those are like the small miracles that move us forward. You know, so are miracles real? I believe 100% with my whole heart. What kind of miracles have I seen in my life? I've been healed before of various illnesses that were pretty rough. I had a jaw infection once when I was like 19, and I went through an experience where there was some laying on of hands, and within 4 hours of that, the jaw infection was gone. And still, you seek medical help and stuff, but this one just like it was so fast, and I was taken care of. And that one actually didn't require further medical attention. Very interesting, right? Um, so, I think we've all had them. You just got to look for them and have the eyes to see them and look to see these things that move us forward towards belief in something greater than ourselves, or at least towards the interconnectedness of us all. And we know that if you have a belief system and you live it, you're going to be more likely to be happy. So why not boost our well-being with building up that spiritual column of our well-being, part of our well-being? So this was a bit of an interesting from the hip video. I'd love to hear your comments on this. What kind of miracles have you witnessed in your life? What kind of miracles have you heard about? And it doesn't have to be the big grandiose stuff, although maybe there has been some of those. I remember I read a post recently of someone who actually did have like a granddaughter that was raised from the dead from a dire illness that had taken their life. Those are big miracles, right? What about the small stuff? That person that was right in the right place at the right time to say the right thing. Is it a miracle if you see a meme or something in that day that just shifts your mood and clicks you into like, you know what? There is a reason to keep going. There's a reason to keep pushing on and doing my best. In my book, those all qualify as miracles. Okay, so uh, leave your comments if you would. Like the video if you liked it. Subscribe to us if you can. This was an interesting topic. Love to hear your feedback on it, and we will talk soon. Of course, we have more content to bring in the future. Take care and have a wonderful day watching for those miracles.